Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss The World Is Not Enough, starring Pierce Brosnan, Sophie Marceau, Robert Carlyle, Denise Richards, Robbie Coltrane, Judi Dench, Desmond Llewellyn, John Cleese, and Samantha Bond, and directed by Michael Apted. Now, this is the first James Bond movie I was aware of as a kid when it was in theaters a long time ago in 1999. So, I did see it eventually when it came out on home viewing. And what do I think of it then? I remember not understanding it. But what do I think of it now? Let's get into it. In Bilbao, Spain, forgive me if I said that name wrong, James Bond, returned by Pierce Brosnan, meets with an old friend who is a banker until under attack and jumps out of a window. And next scene you know, we go to the MI6 in London, and they get attacked by someone who I'm led to believe is Electra King, played by Sophie Marceau from Braveheart, on a boat. And James goes after her in a place that I thought it was Italy, but I don't think so. But he drives under a bridge, which is pretty damn preposterous. And what's more stupid is he's driving the boat on the street to catch up with her, and he does catch up with her on a balloon, and she blows it up, and it's such a bad opening, and it took forever. And so is the theme song by Garbage is, to be honest, garbage. I hate it so bad. Even Madonna's song sounds better than this, and I'll explain how bad that song is next week. In Scotland, Electra's father's funeral, as James has a broken arm and James is taken off duty, but James does refuse that and gets a new gadgets by Q, returned by Desmond Llewellyn, and John Cleese, who I'm led to believe is the new Q, named R. And I like that scene with Q and R, I guess is his name. It works pretty good, and returned by Judi Dench and James gives her a message about Victor Zokas, aka Renard, played by Robert Carlyle from Trainspotting, is back and alive and getting Electra as the next target, and it kind of kicks off the plot, but unfortunately not in a good way. We're in the mountain where James and Electra, there's some bad guys going after them as they split up, and the one-liners that are said in every movie, including this one as not an exception, is such a bad groaner. And what the hell are the writers thinking? It's such a bad cliche. We're in a club where Valentin Sukovsky, returned by Robbie Coltrane, owns, and I like seeing Robbie Coltrane back in the role as Electra comes to the casino and plays a little game with Valentin. But the scene was a little off to me as far as bad acting goes. Meanwhile, we meet Renard as he's killing a guy, and I mean, Robert Carlyle could pull off Menace very well, but not in here, I must say. We move on to Kazakhstan, where we meet Dr. Christmas Jones, played by Denise Richards, who's not believable as a physicist, and honestly, she is the worst Bond girl ever, as she looks more like a freaking model, as James puts a gun on Renard until Dr. Jones led some guards, and she is honestly so stupid because she calls the freaking guards for the wrong reasons, and she is so bad to this point. She looked absolutely miserable after starring in one bad movie after another and being married to Charlie Sheen. Yep, her career is in the toilet. She's terrible in this movie, in my opinion. James and Dr. Jones go on a dangerous mission in the sewer where there's a bomb to deactivate, but fails, and Electra shoots MI6 agents as she purposely blows up the pipes, which doesn't make any sense. Next scene you know, Electra gives Renard M as a gift, and their plan is to leave M to rot as they blow up the world at noon the next day. That don't make sense. Meanwhile, James tries to get information from Zukovsky until Renard's henchmen try to kill James and is unsuccessful. And they use sauce to sink Zukovsky, and now He's in mud oil or something like that looking place. And James and Dr. Jones pull him out of there with Zukowski's men. And this movie is falling apart. Like, honestly, really. While M is being held captive, James and Dr. Jones get captured and Valentine is killed and the man who worked for Valentine brings them to Elektra, and while she handles James, one of the henchmen brings Dr. Jones to Renard, and Elektra tortures James with a neck torturing device, and gunfire begins, and Valentine who comes in and gets shot and frees James's arm, and he dies, which was a waste of that poor Robbie Coltrane actor. And he fights and goes after Elektra and frees them and gets Elektra to call off Renard's attack, and she dies thanks to James, and he jumps in the submarine to get Dr. Jones and end Renard's attack and Renard himself for good. And this climax is unsatisfying. It was falling apart. I think I could make a Christmas joke at some point. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.9 out of 10. The plot wasn't very good, and Robert Carlyle does have menace, but not here, and Denise Richards doesn't convince me as a physicist nor a Bond girl. It fell apart at the 1 hour mark, and I was not having the best time as I watched this in 2 different days, and I had trouble with it in general. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and this time I hope I can sit in one viewing of Die Another Day, as I will be back with that review, and until next time, the name's Bond. James Bond.